Very good. Thanks very much for joining me, Mick. How have you been, mate?
Yeah, my pleasure.
Good stuff. We'll jump straight into it. I'll for the purposes of this interview, I'll focus just on your time in Ireland. You've been all around the world, and there's other really good podcasts where you've spoken at great length about your different tours. Okay, so tell me, you first arrived in Northern Ireland in 1980 before being in the SAS. And it was in I think the place on earth where it was most dangerous to be a British soldier, actually.
Yeah. It's funny because I was in commando forces at the time, and actually I deliberately failed the commando course to make sure that I went over to Ireland, because all the people that were um, going to the course that I was on, they were all going to a different battery, but I wanted to do Northern Ireland tour, so I played on my ankle. They knew what I was doing, so I basically had to wait 6 weeks until the other course started. But I eventually got what I wanted, which was the to Northern Ireland, and it was with the 4-1 Commando, who it was final tour, Royal Marines. It was their final tour before they got put into suspended animation, so taken out. So quite an interesting period of time, because you had the two para losing quite a few people at Warren Point, and they were on a 2-year post, still in South Armagh when we got over. We basically sailed across into Belfast from Liverpool, and then got helicoptered down to Besbrook Mill in South Armagh, and then the routine really was going to be Besbrook Mill, and then going down to Newton Hamilton and doing rural patrols and helping out. But unfortunately, at that time, for me myself, we got completely about Northern Ireland, and the impression was that the Catholics were bad people, and the Protestants were good people. And unfortunately for a lot of military people who are, their first time in Northern Ireland, the IRA being Catholic, everyone assumes that the Catholics are bad people. And I never really sussed that one out until and a bit wiser, and also when I went to Belfast for a couple of years, a lot later on. So unfortunately, we had quite a negative effect really on the Catholic population in South Armagh, to the extent that stopping cars, searching them on a Sunday when they're heading to church and stuff like that. And it's not, I'm not saying that you're proud of what you're doing. It's just that misconception that the British military have got, well, and yeah, it's totally wrong, and we understand that now, because the Catholic population in Northern Ireland are fantastic people, as we found out later on, if that makes sense. So, but a very quiet tour. It sort of ran through the summer, so it was great being out in the countryside. We would spend 3 or 4 days really patrolling the areas of South Armagh in our area of responsibility. So you had 2 para in one commando doing another area, and we were attached to 4-1 Commando. So we just did our thing. And the worst part of the tour really was being in Besbrook, because you're in the Sangers, because the helicopter base there was actually the busiest heliport in the world at that time. You obviously had quite a few helicopters flying in and out. So they had these big Sangers, protective Sangers all around. So you would spend a week at a time in them, and it was absolutely boring and mind-numbingly horrible to be in that, because it was the worst of the jobs that you did. The best job, obviously, was being out in the rurals, in the countryside, looking for things. And the other thing we noticed as well is you don't get much intelligence given to you, purely because all the top intelligence that comes your way goes to special forces and all the other people, and then all the stuff that they don't really want filters down to the Green Army, as we call it. And so you may get a fairly decent, and you can react to it. Sometimes it comes off good. 99.9% of the time, it's duff information, and nothing comes of it. But it's really a point in being that the Green Army in general don't get given good intelligence. They do get given intelligence, but it's from a very low source, because all the good stuff obviously goes higher up. Yeah, a very uneventful tour. It opened my eyes somewhat as to how nice we were, which was a bit of a shock, because we're expecting all these nasty Catholic people to be a pain, but they weren't. They were actually really friendly. Dogs were a bigger problem than any terrorist organisation. Dogs chasing you down the street, quite aggressive. Obviously taught to be very anti-people in camouflage unit. But yeah, and like I say, it was a very quiet tour, but very enjoyable, because it was I was wanting to do as a very young military person, because it was active service role British Army at the time. And anyone that joins the British military will always tell you that they join the military to go on active service. And if they're not telling you that, they shouldn't be in the British Army, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a nice and quiet tour. No incidents, no fatalities, no big no big incidents that occurred. Like I say, the big thing really was Warren Point with 2 para. But that was literally a year before we went over, so didn't really affect us. And I think at the time, the reason it was so quiet is very good military units in South Armagh. So they kept a tight rein the area, so didn't really allow the terrorist organisations to to move and they freely do, because you do get army units going over there. Proactive on the ground, preferring to be in vehicles and stuff like that, which is not the way really to operate. You've got to be on your feet and out being very proactive, and that's exactly what we did. So, enjoyable tour, first tour, really for me, no issues. Loved it to bits. I thought it was great, especially being out in the countryside.
Okay, so given that you didn't really have any like contacts during that time, I figured I kind of get like what your impression of the IRA in the area was like. So I mean, amongst the fellas, when you get over there, like amongst the fellas who had already been there and who had actually dealt with them and clashed with them and so on, what was their like perception of them? Like, did they consider them like very competent, near your level, close to your level, better than the urban IRAs? What was like the general thought on them?
Well, it's a well-known fact that the IRA in South Armagh were extremely good at what they did, and the reason being is it's their backyard. It's their, and it's extremely difficult to operate in South Armagh. Being is your third-party awareness, so how you go about your business, needs to be top-notch, because you may have targets in the IRA, but you ever know who is actually associated with that target. So the way you go about your business could have an impact, purely because you're talking to people that are very friendly with other people. And out of all the areas to operate, I would say South Armagh is probably the most difficult for the British Army. Obviously, urban environment get a lot more action because you're very closed in, whereas South Armagh is very open. But to get any success at all in South Armagh, either really lucky or you've been given intelligence on a plate, and it's really good intelligence. Like us, you spend 4.5 months around the countryside, hopefully looking for something and not finding it, and so it can be quite frustrating. But because I thoroughly enjoyed it, you know, because I prefer being out in the country. I'm not a camp soldier, why I sort of moved on to special forces later on.
Okay, so you mentioned being on patrol. Obviously it was well known that by that stage, there was no like road, basically like driving on the road, that you couldn't do that due to the landmines and all that kind of thing. So what would it be like? You would get dropped off. Would you get dropped off with a helicopter and then do a foot patrol and get picked back up?
Yeah, absolutely. I in that 4.5 months, not once was I in a vehicle. We got from the where we got off the ship, flown straight into Besbrook Mill. When you went on rural patrols, it was helicopter. They took you out, dropped you off. Fortunately, if the weather was really bad, the helicopters couldn't fly, so you'd end up on an extra day out in the countryside, depending on what the weather was. But not once did we use vehicles because, to be honest, at that time, they were a bit of a death trap because of the culvert bombs that were very easy to take out large of military. And as we found out at Warren Point, you know, putting a there, which was absolutely brilliantly planned. You know, and you've got to sometimes you have to admit when an operation goes pear-shaped, and we lost quite a couple, 2 para. But when you look at the planning that went in for that, from the IRA side of it, it was a perfect ambush, if that makes sense. And sometimes you just got to, you know, suck it up and say, actually, you know, news, you know, sad from our point of view, but it was actually a very good operation.
Right. I was going to say Warren Point, I believe, was the single greatest loss of British military life in the conflict. Right. It's worth mentioning. Actually, it was there was 2 explosions, but the first one is what did the killing, and that was triggered from across the border. It was actually from the Republic.
Yeah, and that's a problem because you had the follow-up troops from 2 para that came in, and that you can't go across the border. So you can fire across the border if you see targets. You know, if you recognise someone that you think is a target, you obviously can open fire. But obviously, you can't go across the border, and that made it even worse. So the sighting of the device itself, you know, in a haystack on a lorry was spot on. And then you had the river, which was also a barrier. But also it was the pre-thought of how the military were going to react, and they knew that they would set up their own emergency area, and that's why they put the second device, if that makes sense, and which caught out the helicopter. So the Queen's Own Highlanders, I think, Lieutenant Colonel, he flew in and got out with the blast as well, like, you know. So it, you know, that's off. It was a very, very clever, sad from our side of it, obviously, but very clever and well thought out operation by the IRA. So, you know, hats off.
I was going to say this kind of this degree of I don't know, we'll call it like professional respect that you kind of had for them and their ability to pull off an operation and act militarily competently. Like is this just something? Is this just an attitude you have now, looking back on it when the dust has settled, or at the time were you able to take that kind of level of objectivity with it?
No, right. Zero respect for the IRA at all, or any terrorist, purely because of that. However, you have to respect the way they do certain jobs, and on that occasion, you know, it was the Angels, zero respect for them, and the reason being is, you know, they are terrorists at the end of the day. They are terrorists, and unfortunately, with terrorism comes a lot of really of innocent individuals. and for us that's really a deciding factor of whether or not you give respect. I was on a podcast yesterday with an Argentinian officer who was fighting the Falklands, but I was saying it just so happened that 42 years ago yesterday, where we were winning the Battle of Two Sisters. Now, with the Argentinians, because it was an army, an open army, and you were engaging them at the end of the conflict. Again, we get respect because they were young people, but they were there to do a job exactly the same as what we were doing. Slightly different when you're a terrorist campaign, which the British military say it. And when you're fighting a terrorist, you respect some of the work that they do and the jobs that they carry out because it's a success. No respect at all. They are terrorists at the end of the day, and unfortunately, people don't like that. Probably don't like the way we say that. You know, in our eyes, as a British military crown organisation, we are fighting a terrorist campaign, and most of that is lack of respect, really, for a terrorist, and unfortunately, that's just the way.
I gotcha. I was gonna say, like, I get the methods and killing innocent people and so on. I get your strong disagreement with that, but we'll say, like, the actual cause, like what they were fighting for. Could you see it somewhat from their point of view that, like, okay, these people believe they're fighting against an oppressive foreign government? I share the same opinion, but like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, I put myself in that. If I was a Catholic and I lived in Northern Ireland at the time, without a shadow of doubt, I'd have probably joined the IRA because I'm a soldier. You know, I want to be a soldier. So you got to be realistic. Same as if I was a German in the Second World War, I'd have probably joined the SS because they were. So you got to be realistic here. You know, we're fighting against people who have their own cause. In our eyes, it's terrorism. In their eyes, they're fighting an occupying force. So we understand that and no issues with it. But what we don't do is we don't give quarters. You know, we don't expect any quarter given to us from the IRA. Same as, especially if they are calling themselves an army. So if you're an army and you end up being pretty much battered by the British military, then sorry, but you can't go crying off to say, you know, you could have been arrested. You're fighting or you're trying to fight like an army, but in a sort of insurgent way, which is very difficult for the British Army to fight. So yeah, it's I do understand both sides of it, if that makes sense. But it's for us, you know, from my perspective, we were fighting terrorism. But terrorism goes two ways. A lot of Protestant activity going on there as well. So it certainly wasn't the British Army against the IRA. It was the British Army against terrorism. And if you were a Protestant coming out of Shankill with an arm-like weapon intent on killing an individual, believe you me, the British military are going to take you out as well. People carry weapons intent on killing people, so you were game on. So it wasn't just the IRA or INLA or other Catholic organisations. Bad people carrying weapons, and if you were a Protestant intent on harming, you were going to get taken on.
I assume you described, like, a lot of kind of frustrating sitting around, kind of waiting to do something in South Armagh. I assume amongst the troops, they would have preferred to like get up and get at him. Yeah, would that have been like the general? Even though it was such a dangerous area, and the South Armagh IRA had so many advantages given the environment and the fact that it was their terrain. Like,
yeah, I think if you've got paras and Marines, commando forces in an area, they're very keen to get stuck in. So if intelligence came in that something was happening on the radio, swarm of people would be over there in a shot light, because that's why you join up. Unfortunately, gung ho. It's just a matter of fact that that's your job to deal with stuff. So yeah, pulling back. Some units may not have the same mentality. Certainly robust military British and paras are in that bracket. Would certainly relish the thought of taking on, especially the IRA in South Armagh. You don't get many opportunities of taking them on. So if the opportunity does come up, you're in there like a shot, if that makes sense.
I assume there was no kind of off base activities for you. Like I know that some in like urban areas could go to like pubs or clubs, kind of depending on the time. I assume there was nothing like that.
No, you get 2 weeks R&R. If you're really unlucky, you fly into Northern Ireland. 2 weeks later, you're on your R&R, so you're back in England. And then, so we were lucky. You just try and pick the middle sort of part. So you do 2 weeks off and then 2 weeks. So yeah, it's just 2 weeks R&R back in England, getting fairly drunk as you military, unwinding, chilling out, recharging the batteries, and then back at it. Because once you're back in there is no days off. You are working 7 days a week, and it's full on. But it's an enjoyable full on. So that 2 weeks is quite important to recuperate really and recharge the batteries.
Would you have known, was say who kind of the main players in the South Armagh IRA, like the leaders in? Would you have known like about Slab and so on? You'd have known their names?
Yeah, absolutely, by heart. The reason being is the military are operating out there for years. So every time you do a new unit comes in, very first thing you do is you go through the board of who the bad people are, supposedly bad people on both sides. So we've got the IRA people here, and it filters down. So you got the top players at the top, and it filters the associates. You then move on to the Protestant, what they're doing and how they do it. So you've got it's actually quite hard to remember everybody, and that's why you do a lot of, we call it a P-check. Somebody for a chat, you check the registration, and it will come back instantly. It's a bit like the police network will call who owns the vehicle, and if it's suspicious, and it's the same as people. So if you stop and talk to someone, you can do a quick P-check on that individual, and if you put on who they were, it'll come straight back up. This is the person of interest. So you and just try and get a bit more information, chit chat. But they are rare. They're pretty canny individuals. They've been talking to British soldiers forever, if that makes sense. And some of them are still quite polite, even though the nasty British military to them. And the reason why they're polite, it's really the best way of getting through a military checkpoint. Because if you've got a stubborn me, when you're dealing with a commando or a paratroop, he's going to be extremely aggressive and stubborn back. So the easiest way, really, for people to deal with the military is just to suck it up, be quite friendly, and move on, if that makes sense. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not like that. They carry a bit of an attitude, very anti-British, which is fine. But we're in here for 4.5 months. You live here, so we can play about with you forever and ever and a day, if that makes sense. And even worse if we're in a vehicle. If they give you in a vehicle, flipping hell, Christmas, right? Get out, open your boot, open your bonnet, and you can just really make their life really, really uncomfortable based on the attitude that they come with when you stop them. Because ultimately we have to stop vehicle. We've got that's part and parcel of the job. But if you know, want to get through quickly, be nice and polite, and you'll receive a polite response from the military, because you know, and I teach situation awareness to kiddies at the moment, and we always say, when you're dealing with someone, will reflect their attitude, and it will reflect how you respond. If that makes sense. No different than in them days with when dealing with the general population.
Okay, so you left South Armagh. You went soldiering in different parts of the world. And I wanted to ask you, like, when you're off being a soldier somewhere else, totally different continent and everything. Would you hear about like losses of life amongst British Army in the place that you've just been posted, like in South Armagh? I'm thinking of in July '81 in Glasdramon, the IRA actually ambushed an ambushing party. I think they fired from over. I don't think they did, but they caught one of them where one of the units was hiding in a van, and it was supposed to supposedly cut off any IRA units that they clashed with. Except I think the locals saw them going in, very friendly locals to the IRA, and then the IRA were able to use an M60 machine gun and AR-14s and pump like 250 rounds into that van. It was it was like an ambush on an ambush. Would you have heard of that being posted somewhere else?
No, no. Although everything that goes on in Northern Ireland is a major concern really for the British Army. You know when you're going to go back. In the Green Army, you could play 6 months down the line, they could say, listen, you've got to do an emergency tour. So out of general interest, really, for us, it's quite important to understand what's going on in Northern Ireland. You never know, actually, when you're going to go back. So, yeah, for us, and it's personal, because it's against a and the British Army is not that big, to be honest. It's big. So you tend to know a lot of people in different units that cross there. So it's a personal thing. So when the IRA kill or ambush military people, the British military in general feel as one, really. It's an attack against Crown forces, British forces. So it is viewed, we understand exactly what's going on a day-to-day basis in Northern Ireland. Like I say, you never know when you're going to go back.
Okay, so you spent 4.5 months in 1980 in South Armagh. Where were you before? Okay, you came back to the north in '93. What happened in between? Just kind of fill us in.
Yeah, so we had little things like the Falklands. So I went down there. We because I was based up in Scotland, so we were the Arctic. We did the Arctic roll. So every year we went to Norway for our sins. Obviously, at '82, we did the Falklands, which was actually quite a successful campaign for us, I suppose. But it was while I was in the Falklands that I got the inkling that I was going to join the SAS, purely because of the way that they operated. Very laid back, very non Green Army, if that makes sense. Because it's a very professional organisation. So that's when I got my my first sort of thoughts that I was going to head that way. So 1986. I did SAS selection. Bizarrely, I in the first 4 weeks it's just running up and down hills, and all they're after really. So 200 people volunteer to do it. All they're after is to get a manageable number to then take to the next phase of training, which is a jungle, which is actually the hardest part of selection. Sure. So that first 4 weeks is just running up and down mountains in mid Wales. But unfortunately, 1986 was the worst weather on record on the Brecon Beacons, and it's the first time ever that they've actually postponed test week.
Oh, wow.
Or election. Yeah. So unfortunately, the weather never improved at all. So it was just suck it and let's get on with it. And literally, when you jumped off a vehicle, the snow was up to your crutch. So it was, and bearing in mind heavy Bergens as well. So anyway, to cut a long story short, I was on a route, and I was first one off a vehicle, so I was trailblazing. And all I can remember is going up to the final checkpoint. And the next thing I remember, I woke up in a helicopter, bizarrely. And what it was pure exhaustion and everything else, having to trailblaze through the thing. So absolutely gutted to be told that you failed. And for a soldier to be told you failed SAS selection is like a dagger in the heart, really, because it's your heart and soul. That's what you want to do. So I went back to my unit up in Scotland, intent on going straight back on the next course. But in the meantime, I met my future wife, had 4 fantastic kids. So I actually put off going back on selection for another sort of 2 and a bit years. In the meantime, I was put on the commando course as an instructor, all arms commando course. Did that, and while I was down there, which was in Plymouth, while I was down there, I then started to getting really serious about going back on selection again. My eldest son was born in Plymouth when he was 2 weeks old. I then went back on selection. Next time I saw him, he was 6 months old, because I was lucky enough to pass. And the reason I say I'm lucky enough to get through selection is there are some fantastic soldiers that unfortunately get injured because it takes a lot of wear and tear out your body and your mind as well. And like I say, the first bit running up and down hills is not the hard bit, although it seems it is not the hard bit. It's the jungle phase, because it's all it's mental as well as physical. If that makes anyway. So we sort of finished, ended up with 12 people out of the 200 that passed, and then just got sent to the squadron that I wanted to go to, and also the troop that I wanted to go to. I'm a bit of a climber, so I went to mountain troop, and thoroughly had a great time, and did a few things, operational tours or whatever. But then I got the urge that I wanted to go back to Northern Ireland. So in it, because you're now in a different role. You know that when you go back to Northern Ireland within the SAS, you're actually going to get a bit more intelligence than what you would do in the normal Green Army as such. So I volunteered to do 14 int, which was at the time the IRA scourge, I would suppose. The people go around doing surveillance. But what happened was
this is the group known as the DET. Yeah, just so for context.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I did the course. To be honest, when I was on the course, I actually thought I was going to fail every time. And the reason being is I'm not the best surveillance operator, because I've got an SAS mentality, quite aggressive. Aggressive individuals, when you do surveillance, is not the best. It's not the best trait in the world, to be honest. It's a bit like RoboCop. You get focused and off you go. So at the end of the course, I got called in and said, Mick, how do you feel you did? And I went, to be honest, I'm shocked I'm still here. Because what we do is when you're doing training, you bring the target in, the person that you've been following. He comes into the debrief, and you get a good perspective when you're actually talking to the target. And on all these debriefs that we used to do, it was right. Yeah, Mick, when I sort of did this, I saw you, and Mick, and it was all Mick. And I was like, that, hold on, am I the only one on this course? What's going on? So I actually thought I'd failed. So when I did the debrief at the very end, how do you feel? You didn't? Yeah, blah blah blah. he said, well, actually, because this course is in England, where you can afford to get stuck in, when you go to places like Northern Ireland and you're working in some of the hard Republican Protestant estates, if you're a person that gets stuck in here, at least you can be reined back in again, if that makes sense. But if you're not getting stuck in safe old England, there's a good chance that by the time you get to Belfast or Londonderry or Derry, as people call it, or South Armagh, you're not going to be getting stuck in, if that makes sense. So, and that was the reason they said, mate, that's why we passed it, because when you get over there, hopefully, you'll calm down a wee bit, but unfortunately that didn't work. Unfortunately, but what I found working with the DET is, especially being a regiment guy as well, is that you are slightly different to the normal DET operators who are, normal British military without an SAS background. So not quite as aggressive the way they go. And it's a fantastic skill to have. And that's why SAS people actually do the DET course, because it is a really good skill to have, doing surveillance, because not everybody can do it. Not everybody can look natural and get away with it, if that makes sense. So, and it was good. So I got posted to Central DET, so there's 4 DETs in Northern Ireland. Obviously, one looking after Londonderry or Derry, South Armagh, West Belfast, and then the other one really was a province-wide DET. However, our focal point was North Belfast. So we had the Ardoyne, New Lodge, Tigers Bay, Shankill, but also the DET over in East that had West Belfast. They handed the markets over and the short strand over to us. So that was our inroad into West Belfast. So the province-wide thing went out the window, because we were really, really active within North Belfast. But again, for both sides, they at the time the Shankill Protestant organisations, they were very active, very much against Ardoyne, because it was across the road, if that makes sense, and vice versa. So yeah, very, very active and busy time, to be honest. And as I alluded to, before, we were actually at the bottom end of the Shankill when the Shankill bomb went off, which was a bit of a shock, because one of the obviously the 2 IRA people that carried out that attack were targets of ours. We knew them very well. We'd followed them before. But unfortunately, it was one of them cases where, for that day, we were on a different operation, and actually we were working Protestants, the Protestant bad guys, which is why we were in the bottom part. I was down by the Carlisle Circus, which is at the very bottom of the Antrim Road, when the Shankill bomb went off, so it's just really, really unlucky. But that's Northern Ireland. Sometimes you get lucky, and you get the intelligence that will pick up on some. Sometimes you don't get wind of anything at all, and something happens. But it's always sad when people lose their lives. But it's just part and parcel of unfortunately Northern Ireland at that time.
Okay, yeah. On that, the Shankill Road bomb that you're referring to was in a chip shop. It was in '93, I believe, right?
Yeah, it was, and I can understand why the IRA were going to, because they actually had intelligence that there was going to be a meeting upstairs in the fish shop, which unfortunately it didn't happen when it happened. It was a different time, so it was fairly good intelligence, just the wrong time, and unfortunately, quite a few plus one of the IRA guys got killed, but a lot of innocent civilians as well. But that's you tend to get used to that with Northern Ireland, and it's sad to say, but a lot of innocent people do lose their lives in a sort of, I wouldn't say war, but certainly in a campaign like the Troubles were. You are going to get a lot of civilian casualties.
Okay, so given that you were actually you had previously followed and gathered intel on the two who had done it, did it feel I don't know, like, was there any feeling of like having failed or having dropped the ball or being like, fucking hell, that was we were trying to prevent them from doing this. We didn't know they were planning this, but we were trying to prevent them from doing something, and then it happened under our bloody noses.
Yeah, massive amount of frustration and everything else. When we actually got back, we had a debrief as to why the hell did we not get wind of that. But unfortunately, we very much rely on the intelligence that we're given, and if we're given intelligence on another, because the serial that we were on against the Protestants could have resulted in capturing and stopping another atrocity. It's just unfortunate that the IRA one just slipped through our fingers, really, and it's no fault that no one's going to lay the blame on anybody. It's just that as British soldiers, the DET, SAS, British Army, you're very reliant on the intelligence that you're given and how you respond to that. If that makes sense, and that was just one of them jobs where there was no intelligence at all, and it just happened, unfortunately for the innocent people that got killed.
Am I correct in saying that the DET didn't run agents or informers, or am I correct? I know the FRU did, and they were army, so that was it, the DET didn't at all, no.
No, DET doesn't do that work at all. The DET is pure surveillance and gleaming intelligence and actually getting stuck in. Really, the agent handlers are more hands off. They're the ones that source. So they, if you want to, you want a good meaty job in Northern Ireland, then the DET was the place to go. Apart from obviously, if you join C2, the regiment, if that makes sense. So it's no running of agents and stuff like that. 14 at the time, the DET was pure surveillance driven, albeit gleaming intelligence and then reacting to the intelligence, or trying to pick up as much intelligence as you can by following certain targets and gleaming intelligence about their routine, really.
If you could roughly, just in your own head, if you were to make like a pie chart of how your time on the clock in the DET got spent, would like the vast majority of it have been following or watching people or other stuff?
I would say 80% of the time in the DET, so the 18 months you're over there, is on surveillance serials, doing this or the other. The other 20% is doing close target recce's. Going into people's houses or into backyards, gardens, places of interest where we feel that there might be something hidden, something of interest. So we call it a close target recce. And it's where you go. It's quite a big issue, if that makes sense, and it happens quite often, because that's where you're going to get a lot of the intel, especially weapons, explosive stuff, and that lot. The IRA or the terrorists themselves had to hide it somewhere, and if we had intelligence where we knew exactly where it was, then we would every now and then you would go and check it, that the stuff's still there. And everything else. So yeah, most of it is surveillance serials. 20% close target recce's.
Interesting. Did you personally ever like plant wires or cameras or bugs or any of that, or is it something else?
Sorry, plan.
Bugs, wires, camera, just some kind of electronic source.
Yeah, no, that's no. There's technical people, far too clever for me to be honest. But no, there's technical. We would obviously uh, do reports and stuff where you could do, but no, the clever people used to get brought in to do all that sort of stuff because it is a technical arm. They you know, like I alluded to before, the DET people generally is all about gleaming intelligence, and then obviously you do break into places and stuff like that, but it really technical people do the technical side of it.
I guess it would depend on the job, but like, was there like a typical number if you were following like one, kind of mid-serious level fella? Let's say you're just following one guy. Like, is there a typical amount that's on your team following him around? Like how many do you actually have on him?
Yeah, it depends on what the operation is. If it's a bog standard serial, you would, and it was just, to gain to get a routine going or whatever. Then the teams are actually quite small. Four cars maybe, and away you go from that. But because they, bear in mind that the DET are very very good at what they do, much much better than MI5 in London. And the reason why they are better, third party awareness, because you make a mistake in Belfast, you're either going to get yourself killed or you're going to get one of your operators killed as well. So your third party awareness about you, especially when you're working in some of the hard Republican estates or some of the Protestant estates, where you stand out like a bit of a sore thumb, can get you in harm's way, if that makes sense. And this is why I used to speak with my normal English dialect. Some people used to try and put on a Belfast accent, which I found just mad, because as soon as you speak to a Belfast national, person who lives in Belfast, and you try and put on a bit of a, they're going to look through you and go, why are you trying to speak with a Belfast accent and you're English? So I just went about my business as if I was, an English guy. And I had really long hair. My hair was a lot longer than it is now. I had a big gold earring, the big pirate earring in, jeans cut to shreds, loads of bits of wood in my car. I was a chippy. Sometimes I would get out with a belt on, with a hammer, hammer down one side, and that's how I would go about doing my business. And if I needed to speak to someone, I would just talk in my normal English. Funny old story, but I broke down of all places in the middle of in the middle of Anderson Town, and started to cause a bit of a traffic problem. And I jumped out and in my fantastic English sort of dialect, asked two young lads who happened to be there to help push the car. If only they knew what car they were pushing. Believe you me, they probably wouldn't have been helping. But that's Belfast. People are mega friendly. And just because you've got an English accent, I didn't look like a military guy. And that's really important, is not looking like a soldier. And what I found was if I was in the Ardoyne and somebody came up to make conversation because I looked a bit shifty, or they just wanted to find out who, they were more relieved when I spoke English with an English accent. They were more relieved because I think their concern at the time was the Protestants coming over into the Ardoyne, and vice versa, because at the time you had two sort of gangs, I suppose, IRA and the Protestants over the other side, who particularly didn't like each other, and they were worried that they were going to take each other on. So speaking English was or with an English dialect was for me was quite an easy way out of it. If that makes sense.
I assume you've heard of Captain Robert Nyrak. Speaking of putting on an accent.
Yeah, it's. I mean, to be honest, I just thought you're never going to get away with that when you're talking with local people. That is never going to work. You know what I mean? And everyone, I think everyone over here in England thinks that as soon as you start speaking with an accent, that oh, look, you can speak Belfast, but Belfast accent is totally different to anywhere else in Ireland. And people associate straight away. And to be honest, there is a lot of English people or British people living and working in Belfast at that time. You had Queen's University, so there's a lot of students there as well. Not that I look like a student, I look more like a drug runner, to be quite frank, and used to get stopped all the time going back to the UK. Because I did look shifty. But for me, it worked. You know what I mean? And I think people always assume that it's a dangerous job. It can be, but the way I looked at it, I always had a pistol down my pants, and that was my get out of jail card, if that makes sense. So as long as you're confident in what you're doing, you go about your business as if you should be there. You're not shifting about, being nervous and stuff like that. You can literally get away with anything, really, and just be part of the community. So I got stopped by a military patrol in the Ardoyne, and I was having to do a walk past of a bad person's house because they were supposedly putting something together. So I did the walk past late at night. The British military were supposedly not allowed to be in the area, but as soon as you tell the military no go, what's the first thing that it's like spoiled kids are in there straight away. And as I was doing the walk past, a military unit was coming down the opposite side, down the alleyway, and in the Ardoyne, the alleyways are quite tight. And this, so bearing in mind, you've got a pistol down your pound. You've also got a couple of spare magazines in your pockets. So when the military stopped me, because I did look shifty, to be honest, that time of the morning walking down there. So they threw me against the wall. Thankfully, I had my driving license, and inside the driving license, you had just a little note that said, "Listen, I'm in the army. I'm carrying a pistol. Treat me like any normal person." And it was good because it was a young lad. Oi, oi! Sorry, fighting. The young lad, only about 19, but he sort of threw us against a wall, managed to get the thing to him before he started frisking me and finding the pistol. What he then did was absolutely really professional. Gave me a right hard time, if that makes sense. Sent me on my way, and thankfully didn't disrupt what the terrorists were doing. The IRA putting this thing together. So the operation continued in much the same vein, all down to this young kid. Now, this young kid, I met him a couple of days later in a military camp, and he came up to me and went, "Flipping hell, you're really brave, you lot." And I went, "Actually, the IRA don't know, they haven't got a clue who I am because I've got my long hair and but they know exactly who you are." So really, it's the Green Army and he was chuffed to bits, because he sort of went away and then realised actually the Green Army, you're basically walking targets for the IRA. And then when you look back in the late 70s, and early 80s, there's a lot of British military were shot on the streets because they were easy targets.
So when you're following someone, I guess it might depend on the side of the team, but like if you got a little inclination that like if you're following me and you think I've seen you or suspicious or I just gave you a funny look even, what's the procedure then? Do you pull out completely and take a different role? Does someone have to replace you or?
No, you go and front them up. So and I've done it many times. So if someone's looking at you a bit suspiciously, you just go over and talk to them and say, "Yeah, can I help you? What's with the dirty look?" And then because what happens if you was to shy away, you confirmed everything to that individual who you are. So you just reverse it completely. And we've done this, we call it dickers, having the IRA having dickers out. So spotters, young kids. And they, if they see you and sort of, think you're a bit suspicious, and you actually start shying away from the fact that you've just confirmed it to them. So you just front them up, just go over and as long as you feel honestly that we can still continue the job here, it's no hassle, then you crack on. You just carry on with it. But if you feel that actually, I am totally blown here, but we need then you make that call. But like I say, it's not just a case of just because he's giving me a funny look and I'm not going to confirm it now. I'm actually going to front him up and say, listen, hey, what are you looking at? And they just carry on because sometimes they just back away and they, oh, okay, mate, you don't confirm it to them, by, and especially a regiment guy, you know, it's like a rag to a bull. If you give me a dirty look, I'm going to be coming over there and having a chat, if that makes sense. And that's just the way it was. It was just having slightly bigger balls than some of the people over there, if that makes any sense. So no, it was. There's a very fine line that you have to tread, but you've got to be really honest with yourself because, like I say, if you get it wrong, you're either going to get yourself killed or you're going to get one of your team killed. So it's a very fine line that you're treading.
God, I can't quite remember. Was there any, not even during your time, but during the Troubles generally? I think the DET did lose, like at least one or two during an operation. No, I know there was definite that there was times when DET members got kind of found out by IRA and then shot the IRA in order to save their own life. Did the DET lose any themselves? Do you know?
Yeah, the DET have lost a few people. Before my time, certainly didn't happen during our period. But yeah, the DET have lost. Londonderry lost a couple. They've lost a couple. South Armagh, I believe, which is very difficult to operate. They may have lost one or two in Belfast. Yeah, so it's not all plain sailing. It's a really dangerous job. But let's be honest, it's the people that I've got the utmost respect for bravery are the RUC and the E4A undercover teams. Why? We're only playing at it. We're only there for 18 months, and then we're back in the UK. E4A, they're there. These people are living and working in an area that they live. And so forth. So my hat, I tip my hat off to E4A because what they do and what they go about is just phenomenal. Same as Special Branch, they're living and working under the threats really of being killed just because of the job they do. If that makes sense. British Army slightly different. Where we just go there for 18 months, get stuck in, and that's why we don't mind getting blown or getting recognised or whatever, because that at some stage you're going to be going back to England. So it's slightly different. So we can afford to be a bit more ballsy doing our job. But like I say, E4A, hats off to them. They're there all the time.
On that note, actually, there's the fact that they live there, they have family there, they have roots there. It's I mean, in Ireland, anywhere, if you just put in a small bit of effort, you can probably find out like who someone's family are and where they're from, where their kids go to school or whatever. And the fact that home for ye, the place where you lay your head at night, was an army base. Like you're not gonna get doorstepped, as they say, at a bloody army base, but an RUC fella just goes back to his house in a normal housing estate,
Yeah, absolutely. Someone always said to me after 22 years in the military, 14 in the SAS, do you suffer from, you know, post-traumatic stress and all and you're like that. Well, no, not at all. And the reason being is, one, it's a job that you enjoy doing, but two, it's having, if you've got a really good family behind you and you've got kids, so you could be working in Northern Ireland 1 minute, you come back and you're picking up the kids, and you taking them to school, so or taking flipping dogs for a walk and stopping them fighting and everything else. So it's nice to have that release, if that makes sense. And it's not all guns, bombs, blowing up, killing people, getting shot at. It's picking kids up and sorting out the weekly shopping and all that lot. So yeah, ultimately it's a job. You know what I mean? And you just get on with it. An enjoyable job. A lot of satisfaction, really. But what it did show me on the Belfast side of it is how my first thoughts of Northern Ireland was totally wrong when I first got there, because the majority of the Catholic population and the Protestant population, fantastic people, and I love Belfast. And I went back there 4 years ago to run up all the highest peaks in Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And Ireland as well. And when I went over to Belfast, thankfully the Northern Ireland one is actually the smallest, of the peaks. But when I went to Southern Ireland, it's the first time I'd actually been over the border as such, well, legally. But it's the first time that I'd actually been in Southern Ireland properly, and just found it. What a fantastic country. Everyone really friendly. Even though I've got a British car, bright yellow and black, so I really stood out somewhat. But how friendly, and going up the peak, and then meeting 5 young lads who were also walking up that peak down in southwest of Ireland, was just brilliant, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So someone asked me the other day, if a farmer, a Republican farmer, wanted help on a farm in Strabane or somewhere like that, would you? Because we're getting into rural security. Would you go and help them? Absolutely, I would help them in an instant. Reason being is, what we've done before is in the past. We're all trying to move on together, and as long as he doesn't have an issue with my background, then let's help you beat rural crime. Because to be quite frank, he's probably more concerned about losing money to rural farm criminals than worrying about what I did years ago, if that makes sense. So, and that really sums it up, really.
It's fine if you can't go into it. Did you say that maybe you might have kind of tiptoed over the border, like during the job?
Yeah, not intentionally. It's just that when you're in fields, it's actually quite difficult to because there's no set border, if that makes sense. So yeah, sometimes you realise you have a quick check on the map and you realise, flipping hell, I better move, I better quickly move back that way. It's just at night time along the border areas, it's quite easy now because everyone's got sat now. Well, back in the day, it was map and compass, and away you went, and it was pitch black, and if you weren't getting zapped with electric fences, with the cattle, and dropping your weapon all over the place because you've just been zapped with a big voltage. Yeah, it's quite difficult, and you can understand why people do, but it's never intentional, if that makes sense. And just make sure you're not picked up by the Garda.
You mentioned there in the early 90s, when you came back and you were in the DET role. Yeah, you said that some of the efforts were against the Protestant paramilitaries, the UVF, UDA, some smaller ones. Okay, yeah, can you tell me, did you view them in any way different from the IRA in terms of their competency, commitment, ability to pull off paramilitary kind of activities?
Yeah, not a patch on the IRA, to be honest. For professionalism and everything else, they they just had a different way. They were ruthless. Don't get me wrong. They were ruthless to the core, but they just didn't quite have the same planning set up really that the IRA were sort of really good at. So working against the Protestants was a lot easier because you knew that they were going to mess it up. Somewhere along the line, it would go pear-shaped, and that's why there wasn't that many major Protestant incidents. They had a few, but they weren't as active as the IRA. So really, between the two, both ruthless, both terrorist organizations, one slightly more professional than the other one. And I think a lot of it is down to their network. They had a much better network than what the Protestants had.
So did you ever deal with the INLA?
Yes, on 2 occasions. But again, INLA, IRA, pretty much similar, if that makes sense. And a lot of the Inler boys were ex-IRA and vice versa. And it just depended how they woke up one morning. But they, if I'd had an argument with an IRA commander, right, that's it, I'm off, and he joins in there. So they're very much the same, treated the same as well. So yeah, there's no difference. They were again both very ruthless organizations.
I know you view them as terrorists and bad guys and so on, but did you ever see yourselves, the security forces and the loyalist paramilitaries having, broadly speaking, kind of having like a similar end goal, like they're both enemies of the IRA, they both want to keep the 6 counties part of Britain instead of reuniting. Did you ever see like on some level like we're going in the same direction?
No, like I alluded to earlier on, if you're a bad guy carrying a gun, you're a bad guy carrying a gun. Doesn't matter who you are, what you know. We had it in Bosnia. When you're dealing with factions over there, so you've got the Serbs, Muslims, Croats, all as bad as each other, if that makes sense. And if you're a bad guy carrying a gun, intent on harming a civilian, an individual, you're going to get the good news from the military. So it's black and white for us. There's no in between. And the good people are the good people, so you can leave them alone. If you're a bad person, regardless of what religion, we're coming for you. And it was, it's pretty straight down the line. Quite difficult to operate against the Protestants, and it's not because they were mega professional or anything like that. It's just that you had to be very careful about who you spoke to, and the reason being is that obviously the RUC were very top heavy with Protestants, if that makes sense. So we ordinarily wouldn't discuss operations with the RUC if it was an operation against a Protestant gang or whatever, for obvious reasons, because we're army, we want to catch the bad people. We don't want someone blabbing off and suddenly, the bad people don't get captured. So
I assume the same would apply for the UDR, probably more so. They were chock full of loyalists, and I think Harry McCallion even told me that like they wouldn't give the UDR anywhere near as much information as they would other bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we never operate with the UDR at all. And for one of them reasons, it's that but the UDR they've got a job to do. What they do. But you have to be very aware that both the police and the military in Northern Ireland, not British military, but the UDR and the RUC, were very top heavy with Protestants. With a very scattering of Catholics. So anything involving an operation against a Protestant or a Protestant operation, you had to be very careful who you spoke to, and it's just it's just, one of them difficulties when you're working in Northern Ireland, when you've got a police force and the thing that is very top heavy. And I've no doubt if you go to Northern Ireland in 30 years' time, the police service Northern Ireland will be, pretty much half and half Catholic but at the time, the Protestant population was a lot more, if that makes sense. And but also the Republican movement, their views were slightly different. So, are they likely to join a Crown force? The answer is no. A few do, the brave few, very much so. But majority, it's down to the Protestant population, really.
Interesting. Was this like maybe not an official policy, but like what, like would your bosses tell you, like, listen, okay, when we're operating against one of the Protestant paramilitaries, don't tell the RUC as much? Was it kind of like a spoken rule like that?
Well, every operation that we do, you have to have an RUC presence, and they call them the HMSU, the heavy mobile support units. So they're anti-terrorist organisation. So you have to have a liaison with them anyway, if that makes sense. But the HMSUs at the time were they were just like us, bad guys. You're going to get arrested. And we worked very, very well with the HMSUs. So we didn't really have a lot to do with the normal RUC people. E4A, quite a lot of dealings with them because of the surveillance side of it. And because of the anti-terrorist nature of our jobs, we will work with the HMSUs, who are a specialised organisation within the RUC. Very professional. Not so much brilliant policeman. Funny story. There was a drunk. I was dressed as a policeman in the back of a vehicle because I was doing the liaison between the police and the DET operation. So quite long hair, trying to pretend that I'm a policeman. So they left me in the car, not to get out of the car. But there was a guy drunk, crashed his car in a petrol station, and the three policemen looked at each other and went, "Right, who's going to deal with this?" And none of them had the paperwork to do it. So they called the normal police. Can you come out and sort this issue? And all they did was they went over, gave the drunk a bit of a slap because he was being a bit of a pain in the backside, and they wanted to drive off. And they took his car key and said, "Listen, go and get a taxi. And let the normal police deal with it," which just summed them up, really. They were focused absolutely on the job in hand and doing, other stuff that actually normal police can do. Let them deal with it. Fantastic blokes. Really, really enjoyed working with the HMSUs.
Okay, but by the time you were working in this role, or early 90s, I think it's fairly widely accepted the IRA at that stage was riddled with informants. It was like rat infested. There was so many. There's some who would say that this isn't just because of informants, but like if you tried to do, you had to do like 20, you had to attempt like 20 operations to get one off the ground. It was insane. Guys were paranoid. It was like a house of mirrors. Everyone suspecting everyone else. You in your role, like if you were, let's say you were targeting like a particular IRA unit in an urban area, would you know roughly like if they had a lot of informants, not even who they were, but like would you know if this particular one has a lot of informants in there, who they were, even you on the ground, would you know that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you would know that because you would get that on your briefings beforehand. And we also knew that certain estates had certain informers within that estate, if that makes sense. And that's not to say that they're very loose with the intelligence, because obviously they have self-preservation. They have to be very careful with the intelligence. So a lot of let's go back to the SAS operations where they've gone up against Lockall and places like that. All them operations all stem from intelligence received. If every one of them, always intelligence received. So the IRA, unfortunately, was riddled with them, because money talks, if that makes sense. But it takes a very brave individual, and I know they're not very well thought of, but it takes a brave individual to sell your soul, and also your countrymen for money, knowing full well that if you get caught, you're going to get a bullet to the back of the head. So a lot of the information that they were sending, they would give, would be very, very scant. And every now and then you would get a nugget. This gold nugget would come in your plate, and and it would result in a big success, if that makes sense. But again, a lot of the intelligence that you're receiving, I would say 80% of it, maybe even more, ended up nothing at all. But then you get that 10, 12, 13% that's really good. So it was all worthwhile. But you have to accept that when you're going out on a job, there's a good chance that nothing's going to happen. But you're hoping that this was, and it all comes into play as it develops, and you think, actually, this intelligence is exactly what we were told, and it sort of plays out. But like I say, a lot of the time it doesn't. I've been in looking in fields for things and this, that, and the other, because I've been told there's something there, and 5 hours later you go back soaking wet. Bit of duff information. But you have to understand that these people are self-preservation. They can't give you every operation going, because instantly, they're going to be killed, and the handlers know that as well, because if they start giving a lot of information, instantly suspicion's going to fall upon them. They're going to get shot dead. Suddenly, you've got no one feeding intelligence. So it's expected that a lot of the intelligence that comes in is a lot of it is bullshit.
Okay, you mentioned the term earlier, a close target recce, and I heard you've done some excellent podcasts that I've been listening to in preparation for this, and one of you told a very interesting story about coming face to face with a senior man at his own doorstep. If you might tell us that one.
Yeah, so I class myself as a bit of a rogue surveillance operator. Sometimes you need them. They work well. But we were due to do a CTR in quite a hard Republican estate, in a house that we were told was going to be empty. And we'd actually requested information from Special Branch to just to make sure that the place is, because when you break in, you're expecting to break into a house that's empty. And if someone's in there, it can change completely, because you're going in there armed, obviously. So we got told that this house was empty, and that night we were planning to break into the house to have a look at what was in there. So everything covertly. Breaking into a house covertly, very difficult. Breaking into a house normally, easy. Doing it without people knowing, very difficult. So it's quite a good skill to have. So that afternoon, we were doing a normal serial. We were in West Belfast anyway, and sort of doing a serial. And then at that night, we were going to go back, and we were going to get ready to break in. But just on a hunch, I was in the area, and I decided, just before we all sort of came back, I decided to do a little drive past, and just check myself. And what I used to do then, it's just to confirm, really. I used to jump out, and because I've got my little belt on, chippy, long hair, scruffy, I had a little board with me, a little clipboard. And what I did was I noted the house number of the street directly behind. So I knocked on the door, as you do as a surveillance operator, or not, and expecting nobody to come to the door. And lo and behold, one of our major targets opened the door, and you're like that. Hello, is this? And I looked at the clipboard and just said the address, brass balls, blah blah blah, without even recognizing as such, or making it obvious. And he was quite gruff, a bit annoyed that I'd disrupted him. And he pointed me to the row of houses behind. And off I went, like, got back. But trying to explain that now to the DET, how you got that information, because normal people don't go knocking on people's doors. But on this occasion, it was the right thing to do, because we would have broken into that house that night. And if he'd have been in there, and if he'd have had a weapon, all hell could have broken loose. So it was a good we would a good bit of rogue surveillance, if that makes sense. And it paid off, because what we then did was we gave Special Branch a bit of a hard time for not checking properly, but also it meant that we had to delay for a few weeks until we knew that the house was going to be empty.
What reason did you make up that you found out that information, but not the real way?
Yeah, what I said was I literally drove past as he opened the door. Whether or not they believe me, I don't know. They do now. But when they watch this and watch the podcast, so I wonder how you got that information. Yeah, but I just said, listen, I drove past and I just happened to see this individual coming out of the house. So they took it for red, because honesty, integrity, blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. If an operator says, listen, I've just seen a guy coming out of that house, you're going to believe him. You're not going to say, okay, no, we're going to break in. Obviously you never saw him. We're going to break in anyway. So they took it for red that you've seen it, because doing surveillance and that lot, you do have to be fairly honest about what you do, because like I say, in places like Belfast, you get it wrong, you're either going to get killed at some stage, or you're going to get one of your mates killed, and that's why you've got to be up front. So every time we finished going out on a serial, at the very end of it, you would have a very open and honest discussion about how you managed to get this, that, and the other. And because other people, they might have seen you do something wrong. You go into the briefing and say, yeah, no, everything's really good. They're going to say, actually, mate, I think you're bullshitting there. I think you need to be honest. And that's it. And unfortunately, because I used to get blown quite a lot, when I mean blown, people used to think I was a bit suspicious. It was just the nature of the way I went about it. I wasn't your normal, walking around with my little flip flops on and trying to sort of scurry away. We were full on, trying to get, trying to kind of catch the bad guys doing stuff, like, so, every time they were doing walk past in bad areas, we were behind them and we were straight on them, like, because that's the only way you're going to get the intelligence. You can't back off. You back off, you allow these people to run. So you literally, you've got to get stuck into it.
I was going to say, you mentioned the possibility of you had a gun in your waist, like, and of course there's a possibility that you covertly break into a house, but it turns out there's a fella in there with a gun. I would have to assume that being in the SAS, one of the most elite special forces in the world, I'd have to assume that that you would be like, if it came to a one-on-one, like a pistol drawing thing and a shootout. Obviously, there's lots of other elements of surprise, and it only takes one bullet and stuff. I'd have to assume that you would be that you'd be very confident that if it came to a one-on-one, you're coming out on top.
Yeah, absolutely. Bear in mind that you're doing pistol shooting all the time, and when you're over there, if you're not doing surveillance, you're actually on the ranges doing pistol work, and so you're very confident of being able to pull your pistol out and stuff like that. And bear in mind that we've got the advantage, because they don't know who we are. We know exactly who we're up against, so there is a slight advantage our way. When you're going into a house, your alert levels are a lot higher, because you don't know who's in there until you've actually checked the place out completely. So that's an advantage. Generally, when you go in, your pistols drawn already, because you're expecting the unexpected, or whatever. But yeah, that's, when you think about it, that's, the IRA don't have many successes against the SAS, for a reason. The guys are good at what they do. They're the best at the best. So they expect to come out on top, really. So yeah, no issues. And again, we just treat it as part of the job. That is just one part of the job. If it comes to it, then you've got to deal with it, and then take the consequences of a court case and everything else that comes with that. But we always had a saying, always better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6, and it's true. Never take people lightly when you're dealing with hardened terrorists. But unfortunately, there are a lot of civilians out there as well that can spook you. So it's having that level of professionalism to know what's right and what's not right. And the SAS are pretty good at that, doing that, and the DET lads as well. They're very good at identifying, what is a threat and what isn't. Aggressive behaviour towards you, is that a threat? No, it's just aggressive behaviour. But a guy pulling a gun is a threat, and on that sort of note, really, there's no quarter given at all. We don't expect the IRA to take us prisoner, because I don't think the IRA have ever taken a military. So don't expect the same when you come across the military on operations. No quarter given at all. Don't lose any sleep over it at all. And I'm pretty sure the IRA don't lose sleep over people that they've shot. So it's both ways. They had a job to do. We had a job to do.
What
we
was
were just,
was
we were just like. Go on.
I was gonna say, what was there any part of you, like on some level, maybe not that you were itching to do or anything, but on some level, were you hoping to be able to put your skills to use, as in like look, if you have to have a contact with an IRA guy and you take him out, in your eyes, you took out a bad guy, no one else got hurt. Was there some part of you that would like want that?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Oh, I'll tell you what, you're when you're driving into Belfast, you're hoping on the radio that somebody comes up and says, "We've got a problem here. We need help." And honest, you've got zooped up cars that don't look like zooped up cars, but they are zooped up cars. Oh, absolutely. That's part and parcel of the job. That's why you join. That you get the opportunity of getting stuck in. And that. And anyone that says that they're not that way in thinking is in the wrong job. To be honest, they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. There's a lot of Green Army, normal army people that probably won't have that attitude. But you ask anybody in special forces, if push comes to shove, they'll be first in the queue to get stuck in, and that's just the way it is. And we would expect the same from the IRA. If they had the opportunity of calling, and as you saw with the 2 signals lads, who the IRA actually thought were SAS operators in Anderson Town when during the funeral, that really highlighted to us that we ain't going to be treated well if we get captured. So with that mentality, you're not going to take prisoners, and you're not going to take, you're not going to give any quarter, if that makes sense. So. That one incident really changed a lot of the mindset. Because you saw it, it was in black and white on TV how they were going to be treating military people, especially undercover individuals. And bear in mind that these 2 lads weren't undercover. They weren't anything special. They were just wrong place at the wrong time. Raw signals. Unfortunately, rest in peace for the 2 lads. But we actually saw, if it was our situation, this is what these people are going to do to us. So with that mindset, we weren't gonna go full for that, if that makes any sense.
Of course. Okay, you mentioned to me, but before, okay, you were involved in the foiling of a mortar attack on the Tennant Street RUC station.
Yeah, and also Antrim Road police station. Quite lucky. Again, one of them. So the Tennant Street one was no intelligence for that at all. We just happened, or one of the team just happened to spot a known target coming out the Ardoyne in a strange looking vehicle. And as he, so that instantly, so we were on a different job. Instantly, that was our attention. And they parked the vehicle at the back end of Tennant Street, or Tennyson Street police station. And it was a mortar. They had 3 mortars in the back of the vehicle, and they had it planted so that the mortars were going to get lobbed over into the police station. I was lucky enough to, as soon as the guy said, Mick, or that's where the vehicle's going, I managed to drive in there, but unfortunately too late, because the 2 people that were driving the vehicle had already gone, if that makes sense. So it was just an empty vehicle, really. So we managed to get the police involved straight away from a tenancy. So foiled that attack, which was actually really lucky. Now if that had gone off, believe you me, quite a few people could have been harmed, put in harm's way. So that was a bit of pure luck. The other one was a planned operation because it was intelligence received, and we managed to foil. And it was a pipe bomb attack. The IRA were going to put a pipe bomb in a house overlooking Antrim Road Police Station, and we managed to get all the IRA people arrested. The police call came in on our call, which again was a nice success, because it saved potentially innocent people being killed. So yeah, all good.
All right, so tell me about your work against the IRA in London. That was very interesting to me that you dealt with them on English shores, you know.
Yeah, it's and again, I was literally on a 2-year posting. We call it a posting down London, and because of my surveillance background, it was working with, or helping really, MI5 of all things. And one thing that just to kill the myth straight away, MI5 don't carry weapons, and unfortunately, it meant that we were not allowed to carry weapons, which we totally disagree with. Because we're on UK soil, you're not officially allowed to carry weapons on the UK soil. So the myth. We always got told that the IRA would never come to Hereford because they have the thing in their back of their head that all SAS men carry weapons at all times. You're not allowed. Yeah, you're not allowed to. So working with the MI5, it just so happened that an IRA cell was becoming noticeable, doing activity in London,
Sorry,
specifically around.
sorry to cut in. This is 1996, just to tell the viewers.
Yeah. And specifically around the area of West London, and it was really a predominantly a 3-man team, three young lads really, not really known to anybody, but I think one had attended an agricultural college when he first got noticed, and so it literally got picked up on the intelligence briefing that the possibility that the IRA could be planning something. So we then obviously MI5 UK soil. Oh yeah, again, just to cut the myth. So people always say MI5, MI6. If you compare to FBI, CIA, CIA, MI6, FBI, MI5. So UK Homeland Security, if that makes sense. So unarmed, and they go about the business. So bear in mind that at the time you've got special branch, anti-terrorist team, and a couple of other sort of intelligence cells within London, all supposedly working together. And Anyway, so intelligence came through that these three individuals became of interest, and we started doing surveillance serials on them, and it went on really for 2 or 3 months. Different serials, following doing this. An area became specific of interest, which was a warehouse or a lockup as such. That became a known place of interest. And it really all sort of culminated really with MI5 backing off. And we were frustrated. So we were like that, what's going on? We're just getting into the meat of it. But because they're unarmed, as soon as the target, they think that the target is going to carry a weapon, MI5 will back off, and Special Branch will take over, or the anti-terrorist team will take over. So very, very frustrating time. But it actually culminated in the police doing an assault on a hotel in Hammersmith, which resulted in one of the IRA members being shot dead, if that makes sense. And again, it highlighted the difference between the police and the SAS, the way we go about dealing with terrorism, especially the anti-terrorist team as such. Because we always use an explosive entry. So if we come to a door, we'll stick a door charge on it, and the door disintegrates in a split second, and you're in, and you can deal with it. But unfortunately, the police were using battering rams, trying to get in, and it caused a lot of confusion. And in that confusion, unfortunately, especially when gas has been deployed as well, unfortunately, one of the IRA members was shot dead by the police, and the other two were arrested. But the thing it did highlight is at the end of it, everybody was getting together to pat each other on the back and job well done, all this sort of nonsense. But when you walked in the room, you had MI5 in one corner, anti-terrorist team in another corner, Special Branch in another corner, and then the normal police over here. Nobody was talking to each other. It was all these little cliques, and it was after that really that the powers that be decided that these people you need to be talking the same language. You can't get your intelligence and keep it to yourself and not pass it on. And that was very evident because we were following people, and then all of a sudden I was thinking, hold on, there's another guy over there who's doing the same job, and it basically it was two organisations not talking to each other. So MI5 would be following the same target as Special Branch and vice versa, which could have been a bit pear-shaped, but it highlighted that, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's again they class it as a successful operation because it stopped a potential attack in London.
Actually,
yeah, a lot of the work we did in London at the time wasn't actually towards the IRA. That was one operation. Nearly all the rest of the operations that we did were Algerian or Middle Eastern terrorism, animal rights activists, because they could be bad people. There's a lot of sheiks. They had a bit of an issue going. So it was actually quite diverse. But as soon as the IRA thing came in, that really does focus your mind. And I was actually shocked. The very first picture that got put up, because we used to get a lot of the players used to come across from Northern Ireland onto the mainland, to attend a wedding or whatever. So you would have a briefing, and they would stick a picture up, and the picture was absolutely shocking. And we were like, hold on, we've got better pictures over in Northern Ireland. And again, it just highlighted the point that speak to British intelligence, British military. They'll send you over much better pictures than what you've got here, if that makes sense. So yeah, interesting times really. I didn't really get a lot out of working with MI5 at all. purely because it's different. You know, when you work in Northern Ireland, it's full on. You know, in bad areas. In London, slightly different. Your third party awareness, what you know, when you're walking around Shepherd's Bush, or the Russians like to on a Sunday. The Russians diplomats, they used to like to go to car boot sales. So you would spend an afternoon or a day on a Sunday following Russians all around the car boot sales of Kent. So you know not the stuff that gets your juices going, if that makes sense, as opposed to following a bad guy over in Belfast or down in South Armagh or up in Londonderry.
Oh, sure. I was going to ask you, I meant to ask this earlier, but you reminded me when you're when you were working with the DET in various parts of Belfast, would it happen that you would like clash or like bump into other people essentially doing the same job? It could be a special branch or you were the DET special branch. I mean yeah, I guess MI5 MI6. Would you ever like bump into people following the same guy or something?
No, no, never. Because we all had different areas of operation, different targets. If you were following a guy who was actually going to be meeting another guy, and all of a sudden that guy, so one of the other DETs is actually following that guy, then that can happen, and you're operating in a small area. But generally, everybody had an area of operation, individual people that they were more concerned about. And that's why you've got the different DETs. We've had people travel down from Londonderry down into Belfast. So what happens is they'll send their target down, and then as soon as it gets to a certain area, we will then take control. Because we know Belfast better than same as if we went all the way up to, I don't know Londonderry at all. So ask me to follow someone in Londonderry, I would be lost straight away. So you literally hand that individual over to the people that know the area. And it's the same as us if we were following a target into South Armagh, for instance. You would hand it over to the guys that know South Armagh really well. And it's just the better way of doing it.
Oh yeah, so what were some of the differences in like following someone around London as opposed to Belfast or Derry or so on? Like you mentioned about the third party awareness. Yeah, would that be like the main difference?
Yeah, and also that they're not going to be carrying weapons. Because when you're following a known target in Belfast, there's a possibility that he could be carrying a weapon. So when you're in London, you're following Russian diplomats, or you're following suspected people and blah blah blah. And so generally nobody's carrying. So your juices they're not flowing as much. We're off for a little jolly around London. It was a great way really of getting to know London really really well. So London I know really well. Belfast I know like the back of my hand. And I know Hereford really well. But it's just not quite the same kick. It's not the same adrenaline rush as actually following. Because bear in mind that Northern Ireland is their backyard. It's the terrorist backyard, and where sort of just gets there really for 18 months. So following people in their own backyard and being very successful at doing what we do. Was actually quite fulfilling. Not so much London, because London it was more intelligence gathering, so that it could then be passed on up to higher authority and stuff like that. Everything that you did, apart from that one job with the IRA, that we actually handed over then to special branch, but all the jobs that you do in London doesn't sort of finish with an operation to arrest that individual. And so that's frustrating side of it. I admire what they do, just not quite the same. If that makes any sense.
I get you. You speak with like a degree of fondness about the kind of buzz on the job and the fucking getting your heart rate going when you're off following someone or about to do something dangerous. Do you miss it on some level?
Yeah, Yeah, you do. You know, I drive a big motorbike, so that's my kick now. You know, I'm what 65. So yeah, so you know, you still want that adrenaline sort of rush. But makes sense. I do a lot of climbing with my kids, my daughter. You know, I teach personal safety situation awareness to kiddies and that lot. So again, that's you get a bit of a rush with that one. My daughter actually does all the breakaway stuff because she's more believable. You know, when you're dealing with kiddies and females especially, seeing her, you know, how she can snap someone's jaw pretty quickly and that to get away from some. We don't teach that to kids, by the way. All the kiddies get all the breakaway stuff, but when you're teaching adults, you can just add a bit more to it. You know, if the breakaway doesn't work, you know, try this. But it's more believable coming from a female, if that makes sense. So yeah, so we get that. So having done all that for 20 odd years and then 22 years in corporate security all around the world, in some pretty dodgy places, to be quite frank. We've got a lot of experience there that we can pass on now, and that's why we're getting involved in the rural industry, because you know we used to break into farms quite successfully in Northern Ireland. So having that skill set, we can now help the good guys, you know, the farmers, and this that and the other. So it's again the old poacher turned gamekeeper type mentality. You know, this is how we used to do it. We know how to break into farms, so we know how criminals are going to be doing it. Let's help them out. So yeah, so I get my adrenaline rush really big motorbike climbing, or teaching. I thoroughly enjoy passing on information, you know, and anything that we can teach that keeps somebody out of harm's way has been worth it. And you know, and that's what we'll do. We'll continue to do that. We're me and my daughter, we specifically go out to help people, you know, hopefully kids, because knife crime here in the UK is off the charts at the moment. And you know, but we're very reactive here in the UK. You know, until someone actually gets stabbed at the school's not going to really do anything about it. So whereas you know, we're probably closer to another terrorist attack in the UK than we have been for a long time. But we're still very reactive. We're not proactive enough. You know, we've been pushing Martin's Law for the last 7 years. You know, from the Manchester bombing thing. So I've actually been to the States 18 months ago, Houston, teaching active shooter, because we're very much a very niche type training organisation. So we teach active shooter. Here in the UK, they don't like the term active shooter because the police like to call it the marauding terrorist attack. But we don't follow police guidelines and never have done, because the police guideline on how to do the marauding terrorist attack, active shooter, is all about having a police response. And you know, and I know that any terrorist act that's going to happen is going to be done, dusted, and finished before they even turn up. So we tend not to follow the party line, you know. And for instance, if you're teaching a large company on how to deal with a guy coming in with a shooter or a knife, even the police, when they come in, they will nominate individuals to play an active role in that. But you never ever know how you're going to react to somebody shooting at you until somebody actually shoots at you. And the person that they, you know, has put in a quite an important position, when this, you know, and they get shot at, they could be the first ones that run out the door. So we teach everybody. So from the cleaner to the CEO of a company, they all get taught exactly the same way, and you don't nominate anybody, because it's great having a plan. As Mike Tyson alluded to, it's great having a plan until someone smacks you in the mouth. Yeah. Where on this case, it's great having a plan until the back of your head gets blown off. Then it all goes pear-shaped. So we teach everybody exactly the same, so that when something happens, everybody's on the same sheet of music. They've got their options. Pick your option that's going to, you know, help you survive, because it's all about surviving an incident, if that makes sense. And we always quote the incident that happened in Christchurch in New Zealand with the Australian guy. And the reason we use that as a training thing really is it highlighted the fact that no longer can you not do anything, because if you do nothing, you're all going to end up in a box 6 feet under. So we somebody needs to do something. And I know that's difficult to say, but somebody needs to do it. And then what you're doing, what you're hoping, is maybe encouraging other people to grow a pair, to get stuck in, because it's better to lose 2 or 3 people and the rest of people to survive than do nothing at all and 18 people get shot. That's our mentality. And if it helps people, stay safe, then so be it. We've done a good job.
Speaking of training, there's a very common like film plot where like a guy like you who's like ex-security, ex-military, he's retired, he's living he's living a life unlike the life he lived before, but he gets brought back for like one last job and he's to like apply his skill. If that hypothetically were to happen, if you 65-year-old Mick were sent back in time to go do your job in the Troubles right now, do you think, given you haven't done it in so long, do you think you could like come along and like be a good operator right now?
No, I would be exactly the same. Sometimes people just don't change. And I would be the same lunatic as I was over in Belfast, because it's your personality. One thing you can never change is your personality. You can rein things in, but if your personality is that way, and it works, and it suits you, then there's no changing. You just get on with it. What I certainly would do is I would enjoy Belfast much more than what I did last time, because really we had the opportunity of going out socialising in Belfast City. So you go down there, 4 of you would go down there, 1 person would carry a weapon, the designated driver. The other 3 wouldn't carry weapons, and the reason being is it's very difficult going in pubs in them days, because most people got searched, and as soon as someone pats you, you got a weapon on you, straight away you're going to start asking questions. So most people normally went with no weapon, and then the designated driver would be outside, switched on, keeping an eye out, really. But we found even in those days, we would drink in pubs, and then all of a sudden you'd see a target that you've been following, a few weeks before or whatever, but it just seemed to be a no-go zone. People come into the city centre, enjoy having a few beers, blah, 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 and then off they went back to their little areas, and then all went pear-shaped again. But it just seemed to be an area that people could go and generally relax, nipping down the Cranbar or somewhere else, and a place like that, So, but I love Belfast. I love the people. I think they're really, really friendly. They've been through a lot. It always reminds me of Angola, when they had that war for 30 years, and Mozambique, and how they've managed to move on. Hopefully Belfast and Northern Ireland in general won't go back to the dark days.
Of course. Okay, so there's been loads of like we won't go into it. Thank you very much now for all your time. There was loads now I've heard in other interviews. You've been a soldier all around the world in places that had not to trivialize the troubles at all, but like Bosnia had like you had like way worse violence and atrocities and so on. Like given God above, given that you've probably heard like the sound of people dying or the types of screams that most people never would because they're not in that sort of place. You smelled smells that no one should have to. All these kind of sensual things. Do they ever kind of come back to you or stick with your dreams or anything or flashbacks? Does that happen with you?
No, not at all. And again, alludes to going back to family. If you've got a good background, a good solid relationship there, it's a good leveler. So what happened in Bosnia, came back, you're off on holiday with your family, and a lot of it is having a quite a strong mindset really, of that was a job. It's a bit like being a milkman, if maybe a bit more dramatic I suppose, but but it's a job, and you know, some people have to do it. Sometimes it's not very enjoyable, but it's a job, and that's what you sign up to do, and away you go. So there's no bleating, no complaining, no, you know. And I've got pins in my ankle. I've got, you know, I'm stone deaf in one ear because I've got metal lodged in the back of my brain. I've got crushed fingers. You know, I'm in right all state, but I've still got my sense of humour. I've still got my faculties. I can still jump on a motorbike, still see the kids, and you know, see what they're doing. Still walk the dog. So hey, I'm happy. You know, and quite. I sleep well at night. You know, there's bad people not around now, and to be honest, they, you know, it means that the world is a bit more safer, if that makes sense. So yeah, no, I sleep quite well, and no issue with that at all. No PSD, no flashbacks. You know, I'm just a normal squaddy that just gets on with it.
Oh, good. I'm glad I'm glad you haven't been affected past that. Do you know any ex-colleagues of yours who went and became became mercenaries? I've heard, in fact, me and Harry were speaking about that. There's some guys who that buzz you were talking about, they have to have it. They can't go back to any sort of normal job where it's just boring, routine, everyday shit. Do you know anyone who went and like did the private contractor route?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, quite a few people. To be honest, I was lucky because I went into corporate security, but you know, Afghanistan and Iraq were the big ones. You know, I went out there for a year just to get a break from gas and oil, and you've got them all over there, and you know, and Americans and all flipping sorts of people, and it put me off completely. You know, I don't like talking about guns. That was part of my life. But any American you talk to, as soon as as soon as you find out that you're military, first question, guns, and you're like, oh, no, I'm not interested. You know what I mean? And it's you know, yeah, in the day it was great. So yeah, I actually took a dim view really to places like Iraq and Afghanistan because I didn't like what the security companies were doing either. There's only so many top quality individuals, ex-SAS or SBS or Marines and Paras. There's only so many of them, and when you've got a massive contract, for instance, because you've undercut another company to get a massive contract, you have to provide the bodies, and people were coming over to Iraq who'd never been in the military, for one, you know, done a quick 3-week bodyguard course, and were now expected to look after people in Iraq. And that was security companies, and it put me off security companies instantly. So I didn't hang about. I went straight back into corporate security, and because at least you know what you're doing. And I was my own boss. You know, I was head of security for a company for 15 years. And you just get really good at that, you know. And so my you know, I've got a fantastic family, and it was good that, you know, you can come back and do things with the kids and stuff like that. So, but other people, yeah, they thrive off that. You know, they need to be in Iraq and this, that, and the other. But unfortunately, unlike the military, when you're in the military, SAS, for instance, you know that if you're going to get yourself in the crap, you've got fantastic colleagues around you that are gonna get you out of trouble. Same as the parachute regiment have got the same mentality. Same as the Marines, they've got the same mentality. But when you're in the civvy world, you haven't got a clue the experience of that individual is over there, and you get yourself in the mire. You're relying on people that you can't rely on really. They don't have the same experience, so it's a different world. And to be honest, that's why I have little time. I don't suffer fools too gladly. I've got zero patience. I've never finished a crossword puzzle in my life. I've never painted a wall because after 2 strokes, I'm bored. You know, go and put the telly on and watch a rugby or something like that. Yeah, my missus never ever got me to do anything because I get bored too quickly. Washing the dishes was my limit. But yeah, so on that, really, I just, you know, if I couldn't rely on myself to get myself out, I'm certainly not going to rely on anyone else. So, and that's why I stayed in corporate security, predominantly in the gas and oil industry. you know, and thoroughly enjoyed it. That makes up until 2 years ago when I decided to write a book and start this little consultancy with my daughter. If that makes sense. Keely, just to give you my daughter, she walked up Ben Nevis at the age of 7, following her dad and 3 brothers. And I've seen military people give up walking up Ben Nevis. So that just goes to show her mentality. She's quite a feisty young lady. Thankfully, she doesn't look like me. She looks like my ex-wife. So she's quite good looking. She hasn't got my crooked nose and all the rest of the bit. So, but it's just great coming back now. You know, knowing that you can work with your daughter. If I may, because I was quite lucky. You know, I had 4 kids in the military, and I was really lucky that I just happened to be back in Hereford when they were all born, which is really, really unusual, because normally military kids are born and the father's away deployed somewhere. So I was really lucky. And actually, when my daughter was born, so my daughter's the youngest of the 4, the nurse let me cut the cord, which is great. So I always remind her she's got my blonde hair because I cut the cord. Makes sense. But yeah. So yeah, there are people like that, mate. But there's also a lot of normal people like me that in the past, and you don't need that drug. My drugs, making sure the dogs are okay and that Leicester Tigers are winning sometimes.
Very good.
Not being hammered by Leinster.
Final question. I'd let you go. All your time and everything you share now, very much appreciated. Now, I love and I think my listeners would like people who like long format content generally. They like getting into the weeds and the details, and they're not just happy with like the headings. You know what I mean? They want the meat of it. Okay, so last question. Now and back then, where would you rank the SAS in terms of all these other special forces units around the world? And there's like various ones.
Number one, without a shadow of doubt. And
it's all your own bias, yeah.
No. And the reason for that, I've worked with Delta Force, and Delta Force are the equivalent, really, the American equivalent. On a par, SAS and Delta Force work hand in hand. Fantastic organisation. But the reason why the SAS are slightly above everyone else, in my opinion, diversity. And I always sort of look back on my time. So 1 minute you're on the anti-terrorist team, black kit, blah, blah, blah. You're then heading over to Northern Ireland, long hair, come straight back from Northern Ireland, chop it all off, straight into Bosnia, straight back from Bosnia, you're off down working MI5. It's the diversity of the SAS that just puts them slightly above. Delta Force they can't do the anti-terrorist role because the FBI and that lot do it over there. SEAL teams, you ask any Delta Force operator the difference between them and SEAL Team 6, big difference. The Delta Force people, before they even join Delta Force, are serious military people. They've been in the Rangers, they've been in airborne units and stuff like that. They then volunteer to do Delta Force. SEAL team, Navy people, Navy doing Navy stuff, do a little 3-week course, albeit quite tough, but they don't have the same grounding, that background, as the Delta Force people. So we put Delta Force above the SEAL teams, SEAL Team 6 specifically, because they obviously slightly above the other SEAL teams. So there are fantastic special forces people all around the world, but just the fact of the diversity of it, you can take an SAS guy in any environment in the world and say, right, you're now going Gaza, make it work. They'll make it work. They'll just get on, and it's that mentality. Yes, slightly biased, but it's just the bias is really because of experience of that diverse nature of what the boys do, and they make it work. They tend to just get on with it. There's no There's no airs and graces about SAS soldiers. You know, they're all quite humble. They're all quite small. They're not these 6 foot, you know, warrior type people that people assume you must be. They're all quite small and wiry. Good sense of humour. A lot of Scotsmen, bizarrely. But they've just got a robust mentality that when the chips are down, hey, let's just get on with it and sort it out. And you know, but in any environment. So, am I biased? Yeah, possibly. But that's having worked with other organisations, knowing full well that, you know, they can't do the same role as such. You know, individually in green kit, yeah, you know, pretty much all the same. But then you say, right, you're now doing undercover in Gaza, away you go. Some units are, no, we can't do that. You know. So yeah, so does that answer the question, I suppose?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't know if they're still called that, but the Russian crowd, they used to be called the Spetsnaz or something. I'm sorry.
Spetsnaz. Yeah, not impressed with Spetsnaz, not impressed with Russians at all. You know, you got their GRU, their intelligence organization, came over and did the Salisbury incident with the thing. Clowns, you know, splattered all over the paper, you know, do what they're doing and everything. Now, you know, and again, I've worked in Russia with the KGB or KMB as it's called now. A lot of them work off reputation and everything else, but deep down, you know, individually, not that great.
Interesting, very good. Again, now thank you for all your time, everything you shared. And was there anything you wanted to mention that we didn't get the chance, or just anything you just wanted to get out before we go?
No, not really. It's in a way, I'm glad you invited me on, because I did look at a few of the podcasts, and I think it's important getting an SAS sort of view of how we saw Northern Ireland. You know, because people assume that the SAS go across the island to kill individuals and stuff like that. If the opportunity comes, yeah, by rights, yeah, we'll get. But they don't set out. They don't wake up one morning and say, right, I'm going to go up and kill people. It just happens. So when you get incidents where, you know, accidentally people do get shot, it's not because it's done deliberately. It's just you know, when you're firing bullets all over the place, it's just human nature. And we've had it in every warfare. You know, we've had blue on blues in the Falklands. We've had blue on blues all over. It happens, and it's not nice when it does happen. But certainly, SAS soldiers don't go across deliberately to wipe out people. You know, but when the opportunity, you know, and like I say, no quarter is given. If you're a bad guy and you're carrying a weapon, then don't ask for any sympathy, because you're not going to get it. And we would expect the same to us. And when you saw the two people, the two signals lads, that really highlighted to us that that's how we are going to be treated. So we're not going to put ourselves in the same position. But no, it's just nice, and thanks for the opportunity, really, of allowing an SAS guy really to you know, put our perspective on Northern Ireland, the troubles and everything else.
Of course, thank you very much for coming on. I do want this channel to be a place where anyone at all who was involved in it, any side whatsoever, can come on and kind of get a fair shake and get their story. And I like hearing details. More information on anything in general is just better. It's just you get a more well-rounded perspective on a conflict when you get to look at it from different sides. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I always appreciate it when people kind of get what I'm trying to do with it. You know, it's always
yeah, absolutely. I must admit, I'm not a fan of people going on podcasts and then being really shy about answering. You know, why go on the podcast? You know, we've got nothing to hide. You know, we've done nothing illegal, nothing to hide. So you know, and everything that we say normally you can get off the internet anyway. So you know, why should, and I hate it when people hide their face. Why? You know, that was a job years ago. Just get on with it, like, you know.
Thanks again. Appreciate your time. Take care, mate. I'd love to speak again.
Pleasure, mate. And any time.
Thank you very much.